Noah built the ark according to God's instructions to save his family and animals. True, Noah followed God's command to build an ark and save his family and animals from the flood. Genesis 6:14-22. Jonah was swallowed by a giant fish because he disobeyed God. True, Jonah was swallowed by a giant fish after trying to flee from God's command to go to Nineveh. Jonah 1:17. Moses parted the Red Sea to allow the Israelites to escape from Egypt. True, Moses parted the Red Sea through God's power, allowing the Israelites to escape from Pharaoh's army. Exodus 14:21-22. David killed Goliath with a sword. False. David killed Goliath with a sling and a stone, not with a sword. 1 Samuel 17:49-50. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers out of jealousy. True, Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery because they were jealous of him. Genesis 37:28. Daniel was thrown into a lion's den for praying to God. True, Daniel was thrown into the lion's den because he continued to pray to God despite the king's decree. Daniel 6:10-16. The Tower of Babel was built to reach the heavens. True, the Tower of Babel was constructed by people who wanted to make a name for themselves and reach the heavens. Genesis 11:4. Elijah called down fire from heaven to prove God's power. True, Elijah called down fire from heaven to demonstrate God's power over the prophets of Baal. 1 Kings 18:36-38. Gideon defeated the Midianites with 32,000 men. False. Gideon defeated the Midianites with only 300 men, as instructed by God. Judges 7:7. Jesus turned water into wine at the wedding in Cana. True, Jesus performed his first miracle by turning water into wine at a wedding in Cana. John 2:1-11. The walls of Jericho fell after the Israelites marched around them 7 times. True, the walls of Jericho fell after the Israelites followed God's command to march around the city for 7 days. Joshua 6:20. Lot's daughters turned into pillars of salt. False. Lot's wife, not his daughters, turned into a pillar of salt for looking back at Sodom. Genesis 19:26. Samson lost his strength after Delilah cut his hair. True, Samson lost his strength when Delilah cut his hair, breaking his Nazirite vow. Judges 16:19. The prodigal son was welcomed back by his father with a feast. True, the prodigal son was welcomed back by his father with open arms and a feast when he returned home. Luke 15:22-24. Peter walked on water to meet Jesus. True, Peter walked on water towards Jesus, but began to sink when he doubted. Matthew 14:29-30. The Good Samaritan was a parable Jesus told to teach about kindness. True, Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan to illustrate love and kindness towards others, regardless of background. Luke 10:33-37. Abraham was asked by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. True, God tested Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his son Isaac, but provided a ram instead. Genesis 22:2-13. Elijah was fed by ravens during a drought. True, ravens brought Elijah food while he was hiding during a drought. 1 Kings 17:4-6. Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River. True, Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River, marking the beginning of his public ministry. Matthew 3:13-17. King Solomon asked God for wealth and power. False. Solomon asked God for wisdom to rule his people, not for wealth and power. 1 Kings 3:9-13. The Ten Commandments were given to Moses on Mount Sinai. True, God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai to guide the Israelites. Exodus 21:17. Mary and Joseph found no room at the inn when Jesus was born. True, Mary and Joseph found no room at the inn, leading Jesus to be born in a manger. Luke 2:7. The Israelites crossed the Jordan River on dry ground. True, the Israelites crossed the Jordan River on dry ground when the waters were stopped by God's power. Joshua 3:17. The burning bush where God spoke to Moses was never consumed by the flames. True, the bush was on fire, but was not consumed, and God spoke to Moses from it. Exodus 3:2-4. The angel Gabriel appeared to Joseph to announce the birth of Jesus. False. The angel Gabriel appeared to Mary, not Joseph, to announce the birth of Jesus. Luke 1:26-31. Jacob had a dream of a ladder reaching to heaven. True, Jacob dreamt of a ladder reaching to heaven with angels ascending and descending on it. Genesis 28:12. The Israelites were enslaved in Babylon for 70 years. False. The Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, not Babylon, for 400 years. Exodus 12:40-41. Saul of Tarsus became the Apostle Paul after his conversion. True, Saul of Tarsus was converted on the road to Damascus and became the Apostle Paul. Acts 9:1-18. The book of Revelation was written by the Apostle John. True, the Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation while exiled on the island of Patmos. Revelation 1:9. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams of 7 fat and 7 lean cows. True, Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, predicting 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Genesis 41:25-30. The Israelites ate manna in the wilderness for 40 days. False. The Israelites ate manna in the wilderness for 40 years, not days. Exodus 16:35. Jesus fed 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish. True, Jesus performed a miracle by feeding 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Matthew 14:17, 21. The Ark of the Covenant contained Aaron's rod that budded. True, the Ark of the Covenant held Aaron's rod that budded, along with the tablets of the law and a pot of manna. Hebrews 9:4. Job's friends encouraged him to stay faithful to God during his suffering. False. Job's friends incorrectly believed his suffering was due to his sin and did not encourage him to stay faithful. Job 4:5. Jesus healed a blind man by putting mud on his eyes. True, Jesus healed a blind man by putting mud on his eyes and telling him to wash in the pool of Siloam. John 9:6-7. The apostles replaced Judas Iscariot with Matthias. True, after Judas's betrayal and death, Matthias was chosen by the apostles to replace him. Acts 1:26. The Pharaoh's daughter found Moses in the reeds and adopted him. True, Pharaoh's daughter found baby Moses in a basket among the reeds and adopted him as her son. Exodus 2:5-10. Zacchaeus was a tax collector who climbed a tree to see Jesus. True, Zacchaeus, a tax collector, climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus as he passed by. Luke 19:2-4. The prophet Nathan confronted King David about his sin with Bathsheba. True, Nathan the prophet confronted David about his adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband. 2 Samuel 12:1-7. Jesus calmed a storm on the Sea of Galilee by speaking to the wind and waves. True, Jesus calmed a storm on the Sea of Galilee by rebuking the wind and the waves. Mark 4:39. Cain offered a lamb as a sacrifice to God. False. Cain offered fruit from the ground as a sacrifice, while Abel offered a lamb. Genesis 4:3-4. The Apostle Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed. True, Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed, as Jesus had predicted. Matthew 26:34-74-75. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. True, Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire without experiencing death. 2 Kings 2:11. The prophet Hosea married a woman named Gomer. True, Hosea married Gomer, a woman who was unfaithful, as a symbolic act of God's relationship with Israel. Hosea 1:2-3. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead after he had been in the tomb for 4 days. True, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead after 4 days, demonstrating his power over death. John 11:43-44. Nebuchadnezzar threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into a fiery furnace. True, King Nebuchadnezzar threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into a fiery furnace for refusing to worship a golden image. Daniel 3:19-20. The rich young ruler walked away from Jesus because he was unwilling to give up his wealth. True, the rich young ruler walked away sorrowfully because he was unwilling to give up his wealth to follow Jesus, Matthew 19:21, 22. Paul was shipwrecked on his way to Rome. True, the Apostle Paul was shipwrecked on his journey to Rome as recorded in Acts 27:41, 44. The Israelites defeated the Amalekites when Moses' hands were held up during the battle. True, the Israelites defeated the Amalekites as long as Moses' hands were held up during the battle. Exodus 17:11, 13. Jesus was crucified on a mountain called Golgotha. True, Jesus was crucified at Golgotha, also known as the place of the skull, Matthew 27:33, manipulación de alimentos.